Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with some more overly sarcastic productions, and we are doing Blues history summarized on England, which I'm surprised I have not done before. Um, but uh, in regards to the trope talks, I did get uh, one of you did comment, "Hey, are you sure you have done all the trope talks? There are like 90 of them, or whatever. Here's the playlist, blah blah blah." I did take a look at the playlist and I went through, and you know how YouTube says when you watch a video, it has that like red bar at the bottom telling you like you've watched it or whatever. According to that, I have watched them all. Um, Now I did not one by one search to see like did I actually or did I maybe accidentally watch one of these, click on one of these and then just never did a reaction to it or something like that. That's entirely possible. I don't think that happened though, because when I was going through it, I was looking at the titles and I'm like, yeah, I remember watching those. There wasn't really any that stood out to me as like, wait, did I watch that one, or am I sure I watched that one? Blah, blah, etc. Um, so if there is a trope talk you think that I may not have reacted to, feel free to comment it down in the comment section below. Um, and I will check and see if I have. And if I have not, then well, we'll have more trope talks to watch. But I'm like 95% certain I've done all of them. Um, One of them, right, the trope talk on dragons, the first one I did, that one's under historian reacts. But then I think every single one after that is writer slash fantasy author react. So, yeah, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and, well, that clarification out of the way, yada, yada, yada. Let's dive in.
Names are hard, especially when it comes to the British Isles. The island of Britain is home to England, Scotland, and Wales, while the island of Ireland is composed of the Republic of Ireland and the United Kingdom's Northern Ireland. This is not only a nightmare to keep track of, but as we've seen, this is all subject to change, probably a little sooner than we think. I say all this to clarify what we're actually going to be talking about in this video. England. Now, not
I definitely do believe that. My conservative guess is 25 by 2040, Ireland is going to be reunited. My my personal belief and slash want is by 2030, that the process at the very least is like, yeah, we are reuniting. Um, um, yeah.
only is England not Britain, but its history is plenty interesting all its own. So, to see how England grew from a simple Roman province to the master of Britain and a major world power, let's do some history. Our earliest documentation for England comes with the arrival of Julius Cheekbones Caesar, who crossed over from Gaul in 55 BC. The native Celts were none too pleased with their new neighbors, so Rome kinda stalled for a century until Emperor Claudius established the province of Britannia. Roman influence on the island was rather slim outside of the main port cities. Since it was hard enough to schlep all those armies across the channel, they were happy to delegate certain responsibilities to the local kings. In 60 AD, one such client king bequeathed half of his lands to Rome, but when the empire glomped all of it anyway, the late king's wife Boudica led a rebellion that burned through several eastern cities, including Londinium, before she was defeated in battle. Later, Romans expanded outwards to the edge of Caledonia before Hadrian said nope and built a wall across the island to stop any hotshot general from getting ideas. The benefit of Britannia's insulation was that it didn't see much disruption from the carousel of imperial civil wars, but the downside was that Britannia was the first province to be cut loose when the barbarians started rolling up in the 400s.
It was also so part of the reason why is because now I'm going to get into a bit of hypothesizing here. Now what we do know is that what we before I get into the hypothesizing, what we do know is that Britannia wasn't really the wealthiest province and really far from it. My kind of assumption of Britannia is that if it wasn't a net loss for the empire in terms of keeping it, maintaining it, it was one that was at the very least neutral. My guess is, with going off the top of my dome here, without doing really checking or anything, is that due to Hadrian's Wall, the peeps up here, the Caledonians, and the need to maintain a legion here, and likely some other unrest throughout the region. I wouldn't be surprised, especially here in Wales. Um, my personal belief is it was likely more expensive to keep Britain inside of like it was one of those provinces that likely was um being subsidized by other wealthier provinces in order to maintain it and keep it as part of the empire. Um, that's just my personal belief. Because we just like they dumped Britain, like Emperor Honorius dumped Britain like fucking right away. Like it was like the first thing he dropped. He was like, "Yep, nope, peace. We're Roman Exodus. Leave it." And there are also, I can't remember exactly which historian said this, but one of the historians, when I was doing research on my thesis a couple years ago, one of them said that either they believed or sources sort of were indicating that one of the previous emperors, actually I think this was I think this was in regards to Boudicca's rebellion. Not certain, so don't get upset if I'm wrong, because I could be here. Trying to reach far back into my noggin. Um, at least during one of the big, I think it was Boudica. And like they wanted Boudica's rebellion to kind of succeed, because then it would give them reason to just abandon and never go back to Britain. And that if that is the case, then that lends itself to my belief that Britain was more expensive to keep a part of the empire instead of it was more expensive to maintain to keep, and probably like maybe part of the reason why they just didn't dump it sooner is because of like probably maybe Roman pride, right? Is my personal headcanon.
Hundreds. The next several centuries are marked by a constant shuffling between small Romano-Britannic kingdoms and a tidal wave of Northern European newcomers. The polite term for this is disorganized, and the accurate term for this is gross. The early medieval period
Yeah.
saw raids and migrations from Picts, Angles, Jutes, and Saxons, and while the map doesn't stop fidgeting with its borders anytime soon, the players get a little clearer by the late 600s. Here we can see 7 major Anglisk and Saxon kingdoms of Northumbria, Kent, East Anglia, Mercia, Essex, Sussex, and Wessex. Those last 3 being East, South, and West Saxony, in case you were wondering why England sexed up so many of its place names. These kingdoms
Bro, they just love to fuck.
weren't entirely Britannic nor fully Germanic. Just like the Romans, it was a case of gradual integration between lots of small and unique groups of people, sometimes friendly, sometimes stabby. For a dash of literary context, the legendary character of King Arthur is set specifically against the backdrop of these Germanic migrations. Historically speaking, our record gets a little clearer in the Christian monasteries of Northumbria, where the scholar Bede wrote the Ecclesiastical History of England, our best source for this period. And monasteries
I really need to. I used a little bit of Bede's writing, but not much of it because this was for a senior bachelor's thesis. It was not like if I were working on like a master's, and especially like if I were especially working on a PhD, definitely would have used the entirety of Bede. But even for a master's, I definitely would have used honestly probably the entirety of Bede. But I wasn't. I had very little time. I had like a month of research and then I did like a week of writing. Um, I do have a complaint when it comes. We're gonna talk into the being a historian here, and the work that you do, especially when studying to become a historian. I don't like the way the thesis class was done. The way I write, the way I do my research, and the way I write is I do all of my research. I organize, and as I'm going through my texts and books, I pick out a bunch of information. I tend to just grab more information than I'm going to use, just in case I can spin any of it, use any of it, right? Just to make sure like I have enough information, which I think most people do. But I do not start writing until I have done all of my research, because my approach to historical writing is completely different than my approach to fictional writing. Fictional writing, I just start writing, and then I will do like if I need to research like what would happen if you got stabbed, I don't know, here, right? What's the blood loss like, right? Blah blah that kind of stuff. I'll research certain things as I go along when it comes to fictional writing, so that the fictional writing has believable, realistic stuff inside of it. Blah blah blah. Um, my historical writing, I don't write as I go. I get my research and then I write. The thesis class wanted, now they did this because they wanted us to do like check-ins, right, to keep us have some sort of structure to it, because this would have been your first kind of foray in, like, it's essentially when you do take the thesis class, it is your first time doing something like this. It is the least structured class you are ever going to take. Right, I would meet with my professor like not even once a week. It was just for like once every couple weeks or something. Maybe it was once a week. I can't remember, but they would have us do check-ins, and occasionally we would also have to submit certain things. And one of the things that like we would have to submit were like plotting or whatever, like how exactly we're going to talk about these certain things. And that's not the way my brain works. My brain collects the research. Like how I would do it is I would have it. I still have my paper somewhere around here, but how I would collect the information is I would organize it per book that I was using. I would like, all right, I pulled all of this information from this book, keep it organized that way. And then once I had gone through all the research, I then went through that and I was like, I came up with like a few different overarching connecting points. Like, what can I use this for? This like cultural, or is this like more military kind of thing? What can I, where would this information go inside of the paper? And so, right, that style doesn't go smoothly with the style really that the structure of the class wanted me to do. So I was frustrated at that. I was just like, listen, let me do what I want to do. We'll do our check-ins, and I will submit the rough draft when the rough draft is due, and then I will submit the final draft when the final draft is due, that sort of thing, you know? So that's the way my brain works anyway. I understand, though, like the need to do it the way that they did it, because there are likely some students who struggle more so with keeping on task like I do. Like I can stay on task when it comes to my writing and research pretty easily. I don't have much difficulty with that. Anyways,
all across Northumbria were becoming magnificent palaces of literature and art throughout the 600s and 700s. Northumbria can have a little bit of a golden age, as a treat. The good news is that this was really shiny, but the bad news is that maybe this was a little bit too shiny, as the glittering attracted our old pals the Vikings, who rolled up to the island monastery of Lindisfarne to save the priceless relics from the totally unrelated fires that started burning right as the Vikings arrived.
They're good people.
Weird. From there, the Vikings kept on coming, raiding all up and down the coasts and even heading inland with the Great Heathen Army. This was especially bad news for the King of Wessex, who was partway through conquering Mercia when the Scandinavians glomped their way down the eastern coast.
No. Was he? Hold on. 865. Oh, shit. Oh. Oh no, I'm blank. There were four brothers. Alfred's two eldest brothers had split the kingdoms. But then the eldest brother died around, I think, 865. Yes, okay, I'm remembering. So in 865, Wessex is actually split in two. Yeah, no, I don't think they were conquering Mercia. But Alfred's kingdom, the kingdom of Wessex is split in two because the eldest brother usurped the kingdom while father was gone, taking Alfred on that trip to the Pope, Alfred's famous trip to the Pope. And then when they got back, brother was like, "Yeah, I'm not giving up the crown, but you know what? I will split it. You can be king of like Kent and Sussex or whatever. This part. Um, and so father was like, sure. Then father died, and the crown went to the second son. Um, and then the eldest brother died for some reason around 865, and then it went to the second son. Second son lived for a few more years, and then he died in like 870, which then is inherited by Ethelred, I think is his name. Um, Alfred's closest brother in age. They also have a sister. I can't remember what happened to her. Um, um, but yeah, then Ethelred dies, I think, around 870, 871, 872, roughly in that time period. Um, I think it's believed due to injury sustained in a battle. And then Alfred takes it. So yeah, they weren't, as far as I'm remembering, they weren't conquering Mercia at this time.
They didn't have the means.
Mercia becomes under the Wessex fold in, specifically this part of Mercia becomes under the Wessex fold in around, it's shortly after Alfred is beaten in battle. He goes and hides in the swamp, and then we get the Alfred and the cake story roughly around this period. And then Alfred comes back, wins battle. It's shortly around then that Mercia, this Western Mercia, becomes a part of Wessex. Damn, I still remember stuff.
Or the interest to form a single unified state, but the laws of these incoming Danes held sway over a pretty beefy stretch of land. So we call this thingy the Danelaw because when historians aren't creative, they're at least direct. While the Danelaw became a shiny mercantile midpoint between Ireland and Scandinavia, it was soon reverso-glommed by the Kingdom of Wessex. By 927, King Ethelstan had conquered all the way to Northumbria and began to style himself as King of England. So now, finally, we
As someone, this specific time period is what I specialized in. So it is a little hard for me to just be like, yeah, okay. That summary is fine. That summary is not fine to me. That is too summarized for this period.
we can actually discuss England as a single state. In the century following, Northumbria played hopscotch between English and Viking rule, and some wacky royal gymnastics resulted in the Scandinavian Canute becoming King of England, Denmark, and Norway for 2 decades. But despite the near constant tire fire of Scandinavian invasions and an extremely squiggly royal lineage, England had become impressively well run for the time, as the governing bureaucracy was organized and they knew how taxes worked.
Woo, money.
But, as will become a running theme in the next few centuries, there's no getting over that pesky question of royal succession. After the death of King Edward in 1066, the crown passed to Harold Godwinson, but 2 other parties wanted that shiny headwear for themselves, namely King Harald Hardrada of Norway and Duke William of Normandy. Hardrada arrived to challenge Godwinson for the title of one true herald, but was beaten at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. However, Godwinson's luck ran out 1 month later when...
Nani?
And that's the Norman Conquest.
Okay, I feel like when we talk about the Norman Conquest, we make it, because the way in which Godwinson lost, we make it seem like it was such an easy thing for William, when that was not the case at all. Like, Godwinson smoked Hardrada, and then he did this fast. He was rushing his army, like he beat Hardrada, and then he heard of William's like landing or whatever, and so he hurried the fuck back south of England. Did not I don't even think he really tried to raise any more soldiers. He also had 2 powerful like noblemen under him who were kind of a pain in the ass, and so they also weren't that helpful. But despite all that, Godwinson had the battle was a close thing until like just one unfortunate situation started to cause the rout in Godwinson's army. But yeah, Godwinson, honestly, had he not rushed his soldiers, or had he, had he been more patient, had he been able to muster more soldiers, I mean, how even as things were, despite rushing his soldiers, he still had a very solid chance at winning, and it was still a very close call for William. But William did have the power of God and anime on his side. He did have God on his side, um, as in the Pope. The Pope supported William's conquest or whatever. So yeah, I feel like we just sometimes when we talk about the Norman Conquest, we just too often just brush over like really how close it was. Because I mean, ultimately it doesn't matter how close it was because William still wins. But it's just like, it's neat to know,
Just in a nutshell, in contrast to the other assorted cases of England being conquered, this one had lasting significance. Firstly, William was set on keeping his hot new kingdom, so he invented this little doohickey called a castle and built them all over England to protect his armies from the odd revolt. Meanwhile, he replaced the English aristocracy with freshly imported Norman barons. Now, the Normans, being from France, were French, so they spoke their native language instead of the local Old English. Over the centuries, these two languages smushed into each other to create what we recognize as English, our beautiful disaster of a language. The last significant consequence was that William was still Duke of Normandy, and his supervisor, the King of France, was a little miffed that he went and yoinked himself a kingdom. And this diplomatic hiccup would embroil England and France in a casual 600-year-long rivalry. Now, this is normally the point where English history slavishly trails along the royal family tree through all its twists and turns, but this video is a summary and I don't care about kings. Royal gymnastics are far too dull to be this needlessly confusing. I say this now so we can skip the faff later on. What matters to us here in the mid 1100s is that the royal family married across the channel, so now the King of England became the Duke of Normandy, the Count of Anjou, and the Duke of Aquitaine. England has never been taller. This Angevin period rewrites Anglo-Frankish relations to the tune of "you got chocolate in my peanut butter." Anywho, with this absurdly large tax base and access to half of France load of natural resources up and down the Atlantic coast, the Angevin Empire was an economic powerhouse. Of course, money means rich people, and rich people means armed robberies, so this period is the main historical setting for the legends of Robin Hood.
Hold on, let's take a look. Hold on. Wouldn't that fucking slice open his hand where the fucking arrowhead is? That's like resting on the top of his finger here. Like right there. Oh, well, no, his knuckle, it's right here.
Robin Hood, most closely associated with the reign of the crusading King Richard the Lionheart at the turn of the 13th century. Speaking of military stuff, England took this opportunity to hop westward and glomp onto the Dublin-y part of Ireland. They tried for more, but they didn't really get much else.
See, every fucker telling me, like, when the fucking this is old beef. This is from over like a year ago, maybe 2 years now. People tell me, Wales was conquered by this king, blah, blah, blah. No, it fucking wasn't. Look, these are the marches of Wales, all right? That's half, not even, I would say this is the majority, like, this is barely half of Wales, if even half. Okay, you fuckers? Wales was not conquered until much later, all right? Okay? Clearing that up.
Conquest is all well and good, but it's also expensive, and France was itching to get the rest of its France back, so the early 1200s saw Normandy, Anjou, and most of Aquitaine go poof. Meanwhile, the barons were fed up with the monarchy, that makes two of us, so they forced a few kings to sign a contract recognizing that teamwork makes the dream work. As in, the Magna Carta makes kings consult their barons, and this puts us on track to get Parliament a ways down the line. Elsewhere in Britain, King Edward Longshanks conquered the kingdom of
Now Wales is conquered.
Wales and glomped onto Scotland.
Blue even says it. Conquers Wales. Fuck you fuckers telling me I was wrong. I've been saying
for a hot second, but they broke free. The problem for England was that Scotland had allied with France, and by the mid-1300s, France was in a century-long win streak. King Edward III was a big fan of the part where England owned half of France, so he went for broke and claimed a right to the French kingship to justify a continental invasion. A bold strategy. It won't work, but it took a century for that to become apparent. From 1337 to 1453, England and France were locked in a 100 Years' War. Edward oversaw the first act, where the English poured across the Channel and thrashed the French army at the Battle of Crécy. To explain why, we've got to dig into the real juicy stuff. Economics. All Alright, look, I minored in econ. I have to at least pretend like this was worth something, okay? It all comes down to how they collected taxes. England had the sophistication to tax money and put it towards a professional army, while France took payment in goods and conscription, so their army was bigger, sure, but far weaker. England's advance.
Okay, so slight correction here. England could raise significant revenues by taxing incoming merchant ships at port. These revenues paid for Welsh along with the rest is GG. France had a system called scutage, which allowed a lord to call subjects to arms for a period of 40 days. So here's the thing. England also had the same scutage system, but the same 40-day system. And it's actually what ends up screwing over Edward Longshanks. And this whole tax system actually was a big problem for Edward Longshanks, because he was doing it a lot, and the English like nobility and merchants were not happy with Longshanks. But what this did allow England to do, right, past the period of 40 days, they then the king then had to like pay for them, right? The 40 days was essentially the king doesn't have to pay. This is what you owe your liege, right, as part of your loyalty. Beyond that, you can just go home, or the king has to pay out money, right? And so this bit here, taxing merchant ships and stuff, is what allowed the English to afford to keep people around for the 40 days. France, as he's pointing out, France does not have a system similar to England here where they could raise the revenue to afford to pay for their subjects beyond 40 days.
Far weaker. England's advance would have pressed
There's
onward
TLDR
not for
there.
the surprise guest appearance of plague. Soon after the fighting resumed, the new French king, Charles V, had a much better time than his predecessor and pushed the English out to the edges of Gascony and Calais. The third phase of the war is the spicy stuff that shows up in all those Shakespeare plays. We're talking Battle of Agincourt, Henry V, Hella Longbows, take that, Frenchies! After the loss, France fell into a civil war and almost collapsed until Joan Kick-Ass d'Arc arrived to absolutely steamroll the English. King Henry VI had exactly 0 ways to handle this, so England got swept right on out of there. By 1453, all they had left was a tiny little sliver of Calais. Despite the war's overt goal of conquer France, it inadvertently cemented a distinct English identity through language, national heroes, and insular geography. The other major consequence was, big shock, another succession crisis. I've covered the War of the Roses before, and I respect you too much to bore you with this. All that matters is that a king died and 2 families spent a century stabbing each other over who would get the crown. Plot twist, both of them. Big ups to Henry VII for marrying the houses of York and Lancaster together to create the Tudor dynasty and resolve that mess for good. The Tudors managed to accomplish quite a bit in their century-long runtime. The first order of business for King Henry VIII was to formalize the rules for royal succession, presumably because he had to read about the War of the Roses and decided never again. But he also had outside problems, as King Charles of Spain and the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, coincidentally the same Charlie, was getting a smidge overpowered since he put the Pope under house arrest. Further complicating matters was the little fact that Henry's first wife was also Charles's aunt, and she wasn't bearing any male heirs. Henry deftly solved the 3 problems of Charles, the Pope, and his wife in one move by going diet Protestant and forming his own church. This new Church of England didn't really lean that hard into Protestant theology, but the real swerve was that the church answered only to the king. This quasi-reformist compromise wasn't exactly the easiest thing in the world to enforce, but the Tudors made it work. Meanwhile, back in geopolitics land, Henry made a new push into Ireland, and tried, and failed, to bully Scotland into uniting with England.
Yeah, Scotland!
In the second half of the century, Queen Elizabeth I held the fort against an increasingly aggressive Spain, way too hyped on conquistador cash to remember what hubris means. In 1588, Spain hucked an armada at England in the hopes of conquering it, but English cannons and English weather smashed the fleet to bits. When Elizabeth died without an heir, the crown passed to her nearest male relative, who happens to be King James VI of Scotland. So in 1603, James became King of Scotland and England. Everything after the union of the crowns is the Britain plotline, storyline, where they glomp all the isles, make an empire, all that rule Britannia jazz. So this is where we'll wrap our history of England. And I'll be fully honest, sagas like this give history a bad rap. At a glance, it's a 1600-year-long nightmare that's stuffed with more monarchs than anybody should be forced to remember, and it's easy to get bogged down in any one episode or to lose track entirely. But the good news is that just because English historians are sadistically meticulous and blindingly self-obsessed doesn't mean that we have to be. Because if we zoom out a little bit and focus on England as a unit rather than a backdrop for royal gymnastics, the important kings will make sense in context and we avoid getting bogged down in the details. So then we can clearly see the macro plot progression from Roman province through the Heptarchy into the conflicts with France and out towards the formation of Britain. So let English history show why the big picture is often the clearest and also serve as an object lesson in the historiographic benefits of restraint. Thank you.
And that was History Summarized England. Got nothing really to add. I think he did a good job post Anglo-Saxons. I think he did a fine enough job there, mainly because it's also stuff that outside of my expertise, so I'm not as passionate about them. So I'm going to be less nitpicky about those. But I am nitpicky about my Anglo-Saxons because I love them dearly. That's History Summarized England. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.